IVM.
Hello everybody, welcome to the 15th episode of the Sponge Podcast. We're here with Ambi Parameswaran. As always, we're going to be discussing a chapter from his book, Sponge, Leadership Lessons I Learned from My Client. The chapter that we're going to be discussing today is called Architects and Pillars. Hey Ambi, how's it going?
Oh, good. Amit, yeah.
So this was a really interesting chapter to me. I thought there were some fun stories in there. The first story, which I thought was like the absolute first story, was kind of shocking in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Kurian, the managing director at the time of the National Dairy Corporation, Amul, for those who are unaware, just showed up at your office without an appointment, without a call, without any notice, just showed up. Does that happen?
Well, in fact, that as far as advertising agencies are concerned, that very rarely happens. Very rarely does a very respected client just land up like a walk-in. You do that for walk-in interviews. You don't have walk-in clients. So this happened, I think, in 1986 or 85. Dr. Kurian had come to the same building where Ulka office was there. This was the Nirmal building in Nariman Point.
Oh, I know that building. It's where the Starbucks is.
Yes, now the Starbucks is at the ground
actually, floor. In a kind of funny aside, that's where IVM kicked off that Starbucks.
Oh, wow. Okay, so actually, when Ulka took that place originally on rent, that was the first building in Nariman Point, and it was built on reclaimed land. Mm-hmm. So people thought it's going to sink. So it was a tourist attraction. People used to come and watch that building, wondering when it's going to start sinking. It didn't sink. So Dr. Kurian had come to that building to some other office, and when he was going up to the other office, I heard he stopped at the signage where all the various office names are put, and he said, on our way down, we should go to this agency, Ulka. Sounds interesting. And so that, he finished his meeting at about 3 o'clock or something. He walks into Ulka. And, Dr. Kurian, very distinguished looking gentleman, but always dressed in a book shirt and a trouser. Never in a, very rarely seen in a jacket or a tie, probably never. And he walks in and he says, fortunately, I think we had a smart girl at the reception. So she said, sir, may I help you? So he said, well, I'm Dr. Kurian. I'm coming from the Amul company. I'd like to talk to your chairman. And I think he had read something about Bal Munkur, our legendary chairman. So they said, sorry, sir, he's not in. Then he said, can I meet someone else? So I think the chairman was not in, the managing director was not in, the joint managing director was not in, the client service director. Finally, she was smart enough to locate someone in the office who was a bright, young, enthusiastic man who today is a very big man in media, Sashi Sinha. So she located Sashi saying, Sashi, there is, a distinguished looking man has come here. He says, he wants to talk to you about business. So Sashi ran, met him, took him to the meeting conference room, gave him a cup of coffee. And Dr. Kurian asked, do you handle any milk, any cheese, any food brands? So Sashi said, no, sir. So he said, I'd like to know more about your agency. Can you come and meet me? We have an office in Anand. So that's when, the agency went there the next week, presented, and there was nothing like a pitch. So Dr. Kurian had, I think, Radius was the other agency, and ASP, the second agency. And I think he was a little unhappy with the way ASP was working on his business. So he was looking for a third agency with the idea one day they will take over a large part of the business. So this is how Ulka got his old story about how Ulka got the Amul account.
That's lucky to have a receptionist that on the ball, right? I mean, like somebody might have just thought that he's come to sell chocolates.
Really? I mean, once I remember, many years later, I walk out of the office and I see Bal Munkur sitting in the reception.
Okay.
So I walked out, I was shocked. I said, Bal, what are you doing here sitting in the reception? No, he said, no, this girl, I told her, I'm Bal Munkur. She said, please sit down. So I'm sitting now. I said, you should walk in, No, I'll wait till she finds someone who's ready to see me. I mean, this was many years after, exited the agency business. But obviously we were lucky. We had a smart, girl. And I think we were doubly lucky that, Dr. Kurian just walked in with the idea that, he needs an agency. And so this never happened. I don't think this is very common, which is why, agencies are, in any service industry,
Right.
you're not really bothered about your office.
No, you're not
except for the fact that your people should feel comfortable, right?
Right, and like most agencies I've visited off late, there's nobody there. It's just it's generally security.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah.
It's not like there's somebody there to receive you.
Yeah,
there's a security guard who wants you to sign in, and then he will call the person who you're supposed to meet, and that person will tell you what conference room to come to.
Yeah, so it's those charming old days when we had various secretaries who kind of rotate. So they go and sit in the reception for 2 hours every day. So through rotation, they used to do that. That's all gone. But I think we are lucky. Dr. Kurian decided to walk in and talk to the agency and give us the business. But I don't think that is... I don't think you should worry too much.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens.
So you were then after, so I mean, like once you guys got the business, right, at that point in time, there was a very interesting story about the first time you pitched, which is where the title of this chapter, Architects and Pillars, comes from.
Well,
right?
no, that was not the first time. Shashi and Nitin Karkare and Anil Kapoor, they used to, go and they're the people who actually heard the story. And they kind of repeated it to many of us, and it kind of stayed as a part of, folklore in the agency. So every year around March, the whole agency troops, the team handling the business troops to Anand, and they present the campaign which are going to be rolled out for the next year. It could be a milk campaign, could be a cheese campaign, could be a ice cream, a powder milk, whatever. It could be 6 different products being advertised. And normally Dr. Kurian sits in on that meeting along with his whole team, including the brand team, the brand managers. And very often Dr. Kurian asks a few questions, and then, everything is signed off and the campaign rolls for the whole year. So this particular meeting, I'm told one of the young brand managers or product managers put up his hand and said, Dr. Kurian, I have a point of view. So Dr. Kurian said, yeah, so what is it, young man? So this young chap apparently said, look, Dr. Kurian, I think this ad is in blue color, and I think, we should ask the agency to change it to green. At which stage Dr. Kurian told this story about architects and pillars. So he says, okay, young man, so you want them to change it from blue to green. Fine. Now let me tell you a story. Suppose you are building a house and you hired a very good architect, and the architect comes and presents a design which has, let's say, 5 pillars, in front of the house to support the house. And you tell the architect, look, I don't like 5, why don't we knock out 3 pillars and, have 2 pillars.
Right.
And let's say the architect actually redesigns and knocks out 2 pillars and comes and delivers a house with 2 pillars. And then a year later, the house collapses. Now, whom will you blame? Will you blame yourself or will you blame the architect?
Right.
So the boy was, I think, a little flabbergasted. So he said, no, listen, we have hired professional experts to help us. Right. So they know what they are recommending. You have an issue with the color, raise the issue. Right? Don't tell them change it from blue to green or green to red or red to orange. Ask them, why should it be blue?
Right.
They'll explain to you why it is blue. If you're convinced, agree. If you're not convinced, tell them, no, I don't agree. Maybe, can you think of something else? So this is a classic, Dr. Kurian kind of a situation where he used to hire his associates very, very carefully. Okay. And once he hires the associate, then it is trust.
Right.
It's absolute trust. Right. So if you take the case of Dakuna, right? The Dakuna does their hoardings.
Right.
Those very topical ads which come up. So Dakuna and Sylvie Dakuna was hired by Dr. Kurian probably 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Right. And the trust is so high that today Rahul Dakuna does the hoardings, and Rahul has a carte blanche on whatever he wants to do on the hoarding, he can do it.
Right.
And in fact, the Amul team actually get to know of the hoarding after it's been put up.
How that seems like a very unusual circumstance, right? Is that does that happen where the advertising can go up without client approvals?
Not at all. That's very, very, very rare.
Yeah.
Right. So it puts 2 things. One, it therefore makes the client that much more trusting of the agency. Therefore, you're trusting the agency with the brand, and they're welcome to do anything you want.
Right.
On the other hand, I think it also puts a tremendous amount of trust load on the person working with you. So if I know this particular client is going to approve everything I'm going to present, I'm going to be very careful what I present
Right.
because, I can't tomorrow turn around and say, you changed it. No, they didn't change it, So, Rahul and his team have done a great job in maintaining that integrity, the trust. They protected it. And I don't think there is I've not heard of any client anywhere in the world who is given such a free hand to their agency.
I think that is trust, right? I mean, that is what you're talking about when you're talking about trust. And I think we were talking about this a little bit offline, right? Where you were telling me about how you build trust a little bit, right? I mean, how does that happen? So can you, I thought that was an interesting point. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? How do you kind of get trust to develop between two partners who are, they both know what they're doing. And so there is a certain amount of feeling of arrogance or, like this feeling that I know my job kind of this. So how do you develop trust in an environment like that?
So there are really two approaches. One is to go through a rigorous selection process. After that, trust the person 100%. The other is go through a process, select the person, but start with a level of give and take.
Right.
And start with, let's say, I would say 25% of trust, 75% of questioning.
Right.
Okay. And then as you start realizing that this person is doing his homework and coming, or she's doing her homework and coming, increase the level of trust.
Right.
So as you move the ladder and then you build a relationship, after say a year, 2 years, you'll have 100% trust.
Right.
Right. So you can leave this job to that person and you don't need to police that person. You don't need to question that person. He'll do a great job.
Yep.
So, we've had many such examples of great level of trust between us as the agency and say the filmmaker. Like for example, I think there was a Indica Zeta film was being made and it was a nice funny script and it was a script based on this famous Hollywood film Dumber, right?
Oh, okay.
I think Adam
Jim
Sandler,
Carrey and Jeff Daniels.
Yeah. Okay, so it was absolutely crazy, and these two guys, stand at a place and the bus stops, and these lovely-looking girls ask them, and then they give some goofy answers. Right?
Okay.
So there's about these two guys waiting, and this car stops, which is a Zeta, which has these 5 girls dressed in all bikini, and they ask them, can you show us the way to the beach? And these guys, instead of hopping into the car and saying, we'll go with you to the beach,
Right.
they say, beach is that way.
Okay.
And so it was a simple film, but the filmmaker, Rajesh Sati, had been told, don't put any jingle, don't put anything, make it simple,
Right.
don't, just have some background music, don't. But he came back and he presented the film, and before the presentation, he said, sir, मैंने कुछ कर दिया. I said, क्या किया? मैंने जिंगल डाल दिया. I said, साले मरेंगे हम, बॉस आके सबको मारेगा. तो he said, नहीं सर आप देखो एक बार. Then I saw it. I said, yeah, this is working.
Right,
boss, I think this is working. So he said, you'll support me? I said, yeah, I'll support you. So then we went and actually, it sold. I mean, we played it internally and then played externally, and then it actually was a very, very successful campaign. Where the real idea that the jingle was not from the agency, it came
Right.
from the filmmaker. And did we trust Rajesh Sati on day one? No, it was over a period of time. We had worked with him for 4 projects, 5 projects. Then we realized that this guy will take the brief and then move it forward.
Right.
So very often it's a two-way street. You got to give your partner, your associate, the freedom to try new things. If you keep rapping him on the knuckles, then he will not try anything new.
Right.
But once you give him freedom to try new things, then you'll find that actually they will reciprocate the trust.
Right.
I remember we had done a film for, I think it was going to be running in cinema theaters for Kalyani Black Label Beer.
Okay.
And Kunal Kapoor was the director.
Okay.
And it was like it was an interesting film to be shot in a bar where macho men are playing rugby with a Kalyani Black Label bottle.
Oh, okay. I think I've seen this ad.
Right. So the original script was 45 seconds, and then when Kunal himself was a very good rugby player, so he came and presented a film which was 90 seconds. I said, yeah, Kunal, I mean, this is fantastic, but yeah, will the client approve this?
Right.
So he says, I've got a 45 seconds, man.
Okay.
Let's go present both. So I said, no, let's not present both. Let's present only the 90 seconds.
Okay.
And then let's see what happens. If the client throws a fit, we can always show the 45 seconds.
Right.
Otherwise, and as luck would have it, client loved the 90 seconds and it ran. Right. So it was entirely the question of trusting the associate and say, look, come on, partner, let's let's do it.
Right.
So it takes on both sides, right? You cannot, expect someone to trust you if you are not in a quote unquote trust ready mode.
Right.
Right. At the same time, the other person has to feel that, look, this client is trusting you. Therefore, you need to make sure what you recommend is right.
Right. No, that makes sense. You mentioned, not exactly this, but there was something adjacent to this when you were talking about the classical Tamil book, right? Written by Thiruvalluvar.
Yeah, not bad.
I got the name right. Not going to try and pronounce the name of the book. I got the name of the guy right. But I thought there was, over there you were talking about give them the tools and then let them go.
Yeah. So Thiruvalluvar wrote this famous Tamil book called Tirukkural.
Okay.
Which consists of 1,330 couplets. And they are in 3 chapters. But, in one of the Tirukkurals, what he says is, Idana idanal ivanal mudiyum arinde ardine yavan kanvidel.
Okay. Since you understand that.
Since you already understood it, I will not explain. But it says, find out if this person using these instruments can do this job.
Okay.
Then leave the job to him. Right. So it's that, right? I mean, finally, you find your partner and you evaluate the person whether they can do the job.
Right.
And then they leave the job to them. Don't mess around. You don't keep poking your nose into it all the time.
Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. All right. I think that's a good spot to end. We're ending on classical Indian literature. I think that's a great spot to end.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next week with our next episode. We're going to be talking about chapter 16, biases, where we're going to explore Ambi's biases around different things. And thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
India's a massive subcontinent, home to truly stunning diversity. Behind the veils of smoke that obscure our thriving cities, our history is still alive, glimmering like sequins, waiting to be discovered. And if you, like me, are straining to hear the echoes of our past, this podcast is for you. I'm Anirudh Kanisetti, a history and geopolitics researcher, and I host Echoes of India, a history podcast about India, by Indians, and for Indians. In Echoes, we journey through the complex histories of South Asia and what they can teach us about our globalized world. Tune in every Wednesday on ivmpodcast.com or your favorite podcast app.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Screwala, first-generation entrepreneur and co-founder at Upgrad. My podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open, is a companion podcast to my best-selling book, Dream with Your Eyes Open. On this podcast, I talk to Amit Doshi, founder of IVM Podcast, about my entrepreneurial journey. I walk you through my successes and failures, mostly my failures, and the lessons that I learned from my experiences, family, and colleagues. What was my first entrepreneurial venture? Why I chose Japanese cartoons over animation cartoons on Hungama? Why did I sell my stake at UTV to Disney? Find out all this and more on the Ronnie Screwala podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open. New episodes out every Tuesday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.